So with no further ado, please welcome James Bogart, founder and CEO of Bogart Wealth, to the stage.
All right, good afternoon. I'm James Bogart, CEO and founder of Bogart Wealth. Thanks for taking time to listen to the presentation on scaling an RIA the right way. I came into the industry in 2007. I was young, I was hungry, I was ambitious. I had to figure out how to bring in clients. Fast forward 9 years in the wirehouse space, my entrepreneurial spirit kicked in, led me to launching Bogart Wealth in 2016. And frankly, it was immediately attracted to me because of the fiduciary mindset of the RIA space. But candidly, the reason that we're here today, as Matt already mentioned, is we've had some pretty tremendous growth. I'm super proud of that. But we went from 600 million in May of 2020 up to 3 billion at the end of 2024 with no acquisitions, no mergers, just organic growth. So as I was preparing for this talk, it led me to ask the question of what did we do? How did we get here? And it made me realize any one of you can do exactly what we did. And so what I wanted to do was create just 4 takeaways that you could go home with and have immediate impact on your business. So as we keep going, the fundamental question I think any RIA should be asking itself is, do you have the right foundation in place to be able to grow sustainably and at scale? All right, so the first point that I want to talk about is be intentional about growth. And what I mean here is frame your mindset. It's really important to think specifically about what growth is. A lot of the panels and topics are talking about growth now. But when I think back to our story, and I'm going to tell the whole story at some point here, but when we think back about what organic growth was for us, it was because we got very focused. We eliminated the distractions very, very early on. And the reality is growth isn't a goal. It's a decision that has consequences. Many advisors that we meet, or that we're even talking to, they want to talk about growth and what growth means, but they don't actually define what growth is. What we did that really created a tremendous amount of impact is we defined the firm that we wanted to be far in advance before we actually were that firm. So when we were 600 million, we were arguably operating at a $3 billion firm size even then. And I'll tell you right now, we're $3.5 billion right now. We're operating at a firm that's tremendously larger than where we are right now, just with the way that we're thinking, the investments that we're making along the way. Some of those deliberate decisions that we did as part of our growth story is we built a service model before hiring for scale. What I mean by this is we wanted to have a unique and uniform client experience. Every single employee in the firm knew what that meant. We invested in infrastructure far in advance of actually having those growth initiatives. So very simplistically, you could talk about office space. We were outgrowing office space within 12 months. By the time we were actually completing building an office space, we were already outgrowing that because of some of the hiring that we were having to do. It's investments in technology, it's investments in training. I'm going to get into some of those in more detail in a little bit. But then we also identified what not to do. For us, the inorganic story, at least early on when we were doing the growth curve, would have really been detrimental to what we were trying to accomplish on the organic side. I'll tell you right now, and I'll get into the growth story, but when you're getting 100 leads every single month, it's distracting to think about acquiring a business. You just don't have capacity to do both. So the takeaway here is you really need to make the decision, are you building a boutique firm or are you building a scalable enterprise? Because that decision is going to have implications across every part of your business, every hire, every dollar you spend, and every process that you build. Now, the second element, build a culture that drives growth. Culture is your growth engine. There's a Chinese proverb that if you want to go fast, go yourself. If you want to go far, go with others. And this is an example where in 2020, we had 12 employees. Today, we're sitting at over 54. And it changed everything within the organization. We went from what I would describe as very flat and horizontal to now all of a sudden we have management teams, we have objectives and key results, we have KPIs. And yeah, it's important to maintain the integrity, but one of our core values is growth. Every single employee knows how their roles impact our growth initiatives. It's also imperative to hire for alignment. And what I mean here is you're needing to hire people that can be with you now, but also grow with you in the future. And part of this is getting compensation right. And I'll admit, we had a lot of variations of compensation models as we continue to grow. But it's not just cash and bonuses, it's getting the long-term incentive piece. by the end of 2025, every single employee at Bogart Wealth is going to have equity in the company. That's real, right? And so making sure that you're aligning your team members and they understand, not only you talk about growth, I mean, I would tell you, we have demonstrated embodied growth and you've seen the growth and the results. But the fact is a lot of the younger generation, they just ask, why do I care if you're continuing to grow? And by making them shareholders and letting them own in the participation in the future appreciation of the business, that's real, that's meaningful. I also would tell you one of the key objectives that we learned is adopt and maintain an operating system. So we use EOS, we're an EOS firm, and anybody who hasn't read Gino Wickman's book Traction, highly recommend it. But what an operating system does is it gives your leadership team a cadence to be following on a day-to-day basis. It also establishes what I would call decision-making metrics, so that there are so many things that are just being done that don't have to come back up to you as a leader of the firm. And that's what really starts to create leverage as you're continuing to grow and build. Invest in training. You know, one of the fundamental mistakes I made as we were really scaling and hiring super quickly is I assumed somebody had been in the industry for 10, 15 years that they knew everything that I knew. That wasn't the reality, right? And so making sure that you're building a training module in place, and especially, you know, we're real big on having this uniform client and prospect experience, but having a training facility in place to make sure that every single employee is working, operating, and thinking the exact same way, which are very much aligned with your core values, your mission, and your vision. I also think it's important to invest in the next generation. So, you know, part of this human capital war that we're all going through, I was acutely aware that we needed advisors quickly. I mean, again, we were bringing in, and I'll talk about the numbers, but we were bringing in roughly 100 leads a week in 2020. And we just didn't have enough capacity at the advisory front. We started thinking about the future, and you know, you look at different ways of hiring, but we were thinking about what that next generation looked like. And so what we did in 2021 is we launched Advisor Growth Track. It's an on-the-job accelerated training program for individuals that want to be financial advisors. We're recruiting right out of the financial planning programs. And what it's doing is it's creating loyalty within these individuals, it's giving them a career path, and candidly, it's having real results. So we've had 3 individuals now that have graduated from it. We have 10 individuals that are in the program. We had 89 applicants for 4 spots this last June. So it's clearly got a lot of demand and insight around wanting to see that career pathing to get them to the next generation. But when I think about the future, and so our goal is to get to 22 billion by 2033. And when I think about what that means and how we're going to get advisor capacity, it is the next generation and giving them that clear pathway to being highly productive and highly successful advisors. And the goal for each of these individuals is to be revenue producing advisors. So the objective here is, if you don't, or the takeaway here, excuse me, is if you don't invest in human capital early, you're gonna hit a ceiling. And we had that experience happen to us as we were continuing to grow, where we had too many leads for the number of advisors we had within the firms. You need to be deliberate in thinking about this ahead of the growth initiatives. Business development like a scale firm, and candidly, this is my favorite part of the talk, but don't wait until you're big enough to act like a national firm. So when I think about the growth story, and to really talk about 2020 to 2024 and the roughly 5x that we experienced, it didn't happen overnight. Like we did a lot of things before that growth happened. So real quickly, I'll go back. So when I started in the industry in 2007, as I mentioned, I needed to bring in clients like any young advisor. And I kept seeing all of these firms that were doing the what I call rubber chicken dinners, right? You just do a bunch of mass mailings to zip codes. Like, there's gotta be a better way to do this. And so, I kid you not, I took a map and I put a stick pin in where our office location was in Northern Virginia. I drew a 15-minute radius around it. And I said, I'm gonna target companies that are within that 15-minute radius. So then I set a threshold. They had to have at least 2,000 employees. And then from there, I went and researched, there's 27 of them. I went and researched the benefit programs of each of those different companies. One stood out for me, ExxonMobil specifically. The legacy mobile headquarters was 2 exits down on the highway for me. But this was a company that had a 401k and a pension. My logic, which I'm not going to admit that it was sound, but my logic was, even if they messed up saving in the 401k, they still had their pension, which made them a qualified lead. And so what we started doing was using this really innovative piece of technology called email, and sending out email marketing campaigns for lunches. And the lunches were literally designed because I had no budget. Didn't have any money at the time, but I didn't have to pay for alcohol. I didn't have to pay for a spouse, and I was in and out in 90 minutes. And we were using email marketing campaigns to start generating the lead flow. It was probably maybe a year into these. I had one that I defined as a fail. I only had 4 attendees that came and joined for that event. And next thing you know, instead of doing my talk, I said to them, why don't we talk about what you want to talk about? And each and every one of them, it was crystal clear. They wanted to talk about subject matter expert content. They wanted to know details of how to translate their benefit programs into action. They didn't want a generic retirement planning event. They didn't want something that they couldn't turn away and make into actionable advice. That was when the light bulb went off. Next thing you know, fast forward 10 more years, but I had developed what I called the retirement planning timeline, which was a 25 series educational event specifically customized for ExxonMobil employees. And it was working, right? And so I'll tell you, all the way up until the pandemic, now I'm truncating a timeline here, but in 2015, ExxonMobil moved everybody from Virginia down to Texas. So next thing you know, I'm on a plane, what started at once a quarter, turned into once a month, turned into every other week, and voila. But as we built this out, we were just very systematic with it. Every event that we did, roughly 35% of the attendees were brand new. Of those, 65% came in for a consultation. By the way, every event we do, we give away a free financial plan. But 65% came in for a consultation, 87% became a client. I just drilled in and created a pipeline. And the more events I did, the more lead flow we had, the more meetings I got, and we just continued to build upon that. Fast forward all the way up to 2020, pandemic happened, right? And our firm was roughly 600 million in assets. Our pipeline was about 600 million in assets. And like the rest of us, I was scared. I was unsure of what the future would hold. And what I decided to do was transition to digital. So March 23rd of 2020 was the first digital event that I did. And I creatively titled it, Can I Still Afford to Retire? We had 397 attendees at that digital event with another 700 that watched the recording that week. And I said, oh my gosh, what have I been missing for all of these years as I've been doing these live events? So for the next 2 weekends, again, the world's shutting down, I came into the office with multiple suits and I committed to recording all 25 of the events that I had built. We spent a couple bucks redoing the website. We built our digital media archive. Next thing you know, we're getting 100 leads a week, all digital. And what we found with this transition to digital was we removed the geographic boundaries of doing a live event at a venue. We removed any type of opposition that individuals might have had to feeling obligated to doing business with us because we had bought them a dinner or whatever it was. But most importantly, we completely weaponized our distribution lists. At the time we had roughly 5,000 names on our distribution list. But what happens is because you're generating subject matter expert content, things that specifically speak to the individuals that are viewing it, they were then willing to not only have our clients send it to their friends were willing to send it to their friends were willing to send it to their friends. And that's what generated all the lead flow. If you look at some of the YouTube videos that we have now, they're hands down number one in certain categories. Like for example, one of the topics is net unrealized appreciation. We've got over 100,000 views on that video. That's, pretty impactful. We have one on mega backdoor Roth conversions, which that's got over 27,000 views now. Those are real numbers, right? And that's where you're able to see that scale and get it going very, very quickly and translate it into lead flow. All right, so the takeaway from all of that with the business development is you need to create value first and then identify a niche. I know everybody here that so far that I've heard talk has talked about niche and being specific, but then be the subject matter expert. And when I say niche, I'm not saying a retirement planning specialist. That's a generalist. But a retirement planning specialist for Amazon employees or Lockheed Martin employees, right? That's a niche that can get scaled into. After that, you start generating content. And by the way, there's plenty of technology companies now and even marketing and PR firms that will do this content production for you, but you start generating content. And then you start to overlay the communication medium that's appropriate for the types of individuals that you're targeting. It might be social media, it might be digital, it might be using traditional PR. Once you build that content, so for example, every single company that we are generating educational offerings for, they have a dedicated website on the Bogart Wealth website, and then all of the content that we've created for them is on those landing pages. That's where the power of SEO and SEM and metadata comes in. Because we're subject matter experts, we're able to get a tremendous amount of lead flow just from having those landing pages now. So a couple other things related to business development that I've found have really, really worked. Have someone who owns this. So at Bogart Wealth, we've bifurcated business development and marketing. So I have someone who owns the brand and marketing, and the business development is someone specifically responsible for generating lead flow for us. Having that ownership is very meaningful and deeply impactful. It can't be part-time of a CEO or part-time of an advisor, but that's what starts to create a tremendous amount of scale. And our brand is stronger than firms that are 10 times our headcount because of this type of thinking. And I would also say that advisors want to come and join us because they've already heard of us from their prospects. All right, I want to make sure I don't run out of time. Business development is your recruitment and growth pipeline. The last point that I want to make is have systems that scale. Growth without structure is complete and absolute chaos. So what we did that was really enabled us to be able to scale quickly is we departmentalized the business. We had an operations department, client service department, financial planning department, tax, marketing, business development. But that's what enabled us to go from 600 million, to 3 billion and even beyond. Technology, we integrate all of our technology. So our CRM talks to our financial planning software, which talks to all of our marketing software. I then get dashboards for every single department within the company every single morning. So as an example, I can tell you the number of prospects that were booked on Friday when I get my business development dashboard update. Every department in the firm has those dashboards. It's also imperative to be investing in your data. Bad data in, bad data out. You cannot make very accurate and reliable decisions about your business if you don't have good data. One example of this is how we use our staffing models. So one of the ratios that we're constantly looking at is the number of clients per advisor. We then can look at the amount of lead flow that we have. We apply our historical close ratios to it. And then at that point, we're able to determine when we need to be hiring an advisor ahead of when those capacity needs are being generated. And the reality is you can't hire an advisor and expect them to be immediately impactful. It takes time. We hired one in March, and here it is September, and now he's generating a lot of value for us. But it was about a 6-month ramp-up time to get him trained. Understand the value of the value of your time. Focus on your highest and best use. So very simplistically here, if your time is worth $300 an hour, you need to be delegating to somebody who's doing the $25 an hour tasks. Focus on that highest and best use. And then lastly, have process discipline. For example, every advisor in your firm doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. Let them plug into your infrastructure so that you can generate meaningful impact very early on. All right, so with that, build the systems today for the firm that you want to be 5 years from now. So I think it's important, the existential question that every RIA needs to be asking is, do they want to spend the next 10 years trying to figure all of this out? Some years ago, we went down the road of potentially choosing a partner, and the fundamental question I kept asking is, who can get me to 22 billion faster than I can get there myself? I chose to build it, and frankly, I'm proud of that. But building takes time, it takes capital, it takes mistakes, it takes a lot of patience. For some firms, the right pathway is to plug into an organization that has already figured out a lot of these things so they can focus on what they do well: business development, maintaining relationship with clients. Don't have to be figuring out office space leases or what vendor to be using. Let someone else figure that out for you. But whether you build it or partner, be intentional. We scaled from 600 million to 3 billion in 4 years because we knew exactly the firm that we wanted to be. If you're not asking that same question, you're just hoping for growth, and hope is not a strategy. Thank you very much.